Hey everyone, welcome to Vineyard Youth. I want to start by welcoming all of our new sixth graders. We're glad to have you. It's great that you're with us, and we hope that you're glad you're here, and we hope that we get to know you a little better over the next couple months, over the next couple years, because you're stuck with us, and that you enjoy your time with us and you get to make new friends, have new experiences in youth group. It's such an exciting time, and youth group's so awesome to be a part of. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Nick Sybouts. I'm the middle school pastor here at Vineyard. I'm the father of two awesome kiddos. I have Kyron, who's 5, and a 2-month-old, Rayma. I've been doing youth ministry for longer than most of you have been alive, which is a little depressing because it means I'm getting old, or I'm already there. We're not really sure which one it is. But all that to say, you'll see me here on the screen pretty regularly because it's my job to kind of come up with a curriculum for across the board for the campuses and Sunday nights and things along those lines. So ta-da, here we are. And so some of these videos will happen from the comfort of my office, and some of these will be a little more formal, but you'll see these pretty regularly, and you'll see me pretty regularly, and I'll be coming around to the campuses from time to time as well. So this week we're starting a new series, and for those of you that are with your first time with us, you haven't missed anything. You're not coming in mid-series, you're coming in on a brand new series. And this new series over the next couple weeks is called Won't You Be My Neighbor? And so any Mr. Rogers fans or Daniel Tiger fans, you'll know what that reference is from. But this reference also comes from Jesus and his teachings. So throughout Jesus' teachings, people are asking, what does this really mean? What does it really look like to love each other? And it was kind of a central theme of a lot of Jesus' teaching as well. So through this series, we're going to kind of look at some of those things of what does it mean to love others, and what does it really mean to be a neighbor in the way Jesus meant be a neighbor. And so in the Bible, we find that Jesus was talking to this religious leader, and so it was somebody that was a lawyer, a religious lawyer, so they were pretty comfortable with Jewish law. And they came up to Jesus hoping to kind of trap him or hoping to find an answer that they're looking for. How many of you guys have ever gone to your parents and asked a question and then didn't get the answer you want, so you go to a different parent? And so this is kind of what this lawyer's doing. He's trying to get the answer that he wants. He's trying to massage this in a way where he can ask it to get the preferred answer. And as a lawyer, he probably was pretty accustomed to that. And it's interesting that we find the story in the book of Luke that's a little different than Matthew and Mark, because when the lawyer asks Jesus the question, instead of answering it, Jesus turns it back around. And Jesus says, what do you think? How do you read it? And this being a religious lawyer, he knew kind of what everything boiled down to because he probably knew much of the Old Testament. And he says it's easy. It's love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your strength, and your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. And so then this man asks a question, and the passage in Luke says he was trying to justify his actions. So he was trying to make himself feel better. And he asked this question that we've all struggled with, and we've all kind of asked at a different point. So what does that mean? Who exactly is my neighbor? And what he's asking is, who do I really have to love? Like, what's the requirement here? What can I get away with, and what can I not get away with? I mean, I have to love these people over here that are easy to love, but surely you don't mean loving the people over here that are a little harder or more difficult to love. Now, think of it like this. How many of you guys have chores that you do at home? And how many of you guys, like me, will wait till the very last minute and do the very least at the very last minute to just say you've checked the box? Like mom and dad are pulling in the driveway last minute. Yeah, that was me growing up. I'm still somewhat like that with my wife today. And so what the man was asking is kind of a twofold question. One, what do you mean? Who do I have to love? Like who are we talking about here? And what's the least amount that I can do to check that box? And two, can I earn favor with God, and can I earn my salvation, and can I earn it by just loving the people that I want to love? Or is this going to really cost me something? He was basically asking, can I do the least amount possible and still be okay with God? So Jesus responds to this, and he responds by telling a story. And it's a story that we've all heard and that we all know. And it's the story of the Good Samaritan. But I want to look at a couple things that we might ordinarily miss when we read this passage, because we don't understand some things that would have popped out at them culturally like they would have when Jesus was telling this story. And so some of the things that he said, everyone listening there would immediately understood, but we wouldn't understand it because we're not in that context. So the basic gist of the story is that there's a man, and the description is that he's probably a good, wholesome Jewish man, because the people that were listening to it would have expected that he would expect that he was a Jewish man. And he was walking, and the concept is that he was walking from Jericho to Jerusalem. It was about a 16-mile trek. And he was attacked by muggers. And what we don't understand reading the story because of our culture is that At the time of Jesus, the muggers on the side of the roads weren't just simply people that would rob people and walk away like we see sometimes today. And it would have been assumed by the people that were listening that these people probably were trying not to have to hurt this guy. They were willing to, but they were trying not to, because during that time the Roman government was incredibly harsh. And part of the way they kept peace across their empire was to be very harsh to the people that broke laws, especially people that hurt Roman citizens. And so this Jewish man was under the Roman government. He was under the Roman rule. And so these muggers wouldn't try to hurt this guy unless he was trying to put up a fight or he had something of great worth that was worth trying, this. And so this man probably had tried to fight back. He probably had something of great value with him, or he had value on him. And in order to protect themselves and to get whatever he was carrying that had value and with them, they probably were going to hurt him to the point of death or near death in order to not be identified, give themselves time to get away, and hopefully get away with the crime. So all that to say, this man was in bad shape. Bad shape. Probably like the people that are passing wouldn't be able to differentiate if this guy's dead or alive. Bad shape, right? And so Jesus continues and he points out that two men combined don't help the man. And we hear this now and we're like, how could they? Who do they think they are that they wouldn't help it? But understand that the people that were listening didn't see it quite that way. So the first guy that walked by was a priest. And this doesn't mean much to us except that he was a religious leader. But except the fact that in that day, it had a much different meaning for them that heard Jesus' story. In fact, they probably all shook their head in acknowledgement that, yeah, he wouldn't stop. It makes sense that he wouldn't stop. And here's what I mean. In Jesus' day, the priest was probably traveling from Jericho to Jerusalem. They had about a 2-week stint where they would travel to the temple and do sacrifices and serve in the temple, and then they'd have a week off. And so he was probably traveling back the 16-mile trek to serve in the temple in Jerusalem. And he probably was fairly wealthy. The priests this time had some significance and some clout in society. They were pretty high-ranking in the societal structure. And so he probably wasn't walking. He was probably riding on a donkey or a camel, something along those lines to make the journey a little easier for him. He might have even had people traveling with him. And upon seeing this man, there was probably a series of questions that were going through his mind. Who is he? What nationality is he? Is he alive? And so on. He's probably mentally processing all these things. And all these are important because if he guessed wrong and he went to help the man, he would have been considered unclean and unable to fulfill his priestly duties. Now, for us, take a sick day. Take a week off and try to get... And so he would have had to gone through a week of cleansing in order to be able to be whole in order to go back to the temple. Well, in that culture, it wasn't that simple. It wasn't as simple as saying, hey, take a week of sick time. And in fact, if he tried to help this man, realize he was dead, then go and to try to do his sacrifice in the temple and do his duties as a priest, they would have probably killed him for being unclean and then trying to come into the temple. So this is a big deal. And now behind him was a Levite. Now understand, the Levites were also part of the priestly class. He probably wasn't a priest, but he did serve in the temple. And they were the ones that supported the priests that were in the temple. And so they had the same regulations about them. And he was probably aware that the priests were making the same journey at the same time, that this priest was probably ahead of him because they probably worked together pretty closely. And so his thought process was probably, hey, the priest didn't help out, so I'm justified in not helping out as well. And if he's not going to help him, I don't dare touch him. But even for this Levite, it was almost a matter of significance for his family. Like, if I lose my role in the temple, what happens to my family? If I don't go and collect tithes for the temple, what happens to the temple? And not only that, the Levites were a group or a sect of the Israelite people that their whole job, when they were broken up into tribes, the Levite tribe their whole job was to minister in the temple. So this wasn't just a job to him. This was like a hand-me-down from generation to generation, a legacy thing that he was carrying on. This was of great significance to him. So he wouldn't dare stop and touch this man and be made unclean. So finally, the third man comes around, and this is a Samaritan, and these people were despised. I'm talking hated. Nobody liked them. Think of the worst person you can think of, and it was like that. They hated him that much. I'm talking they hated him as much as people hate Cubs fans. This is a big deal. You guys know that I'm a huge Cardinals fan, so obviously we don't like Cubs fan. But this was even worse than that. This is worse than being a Cubs fan. So if anybody had the excuse not to stop, and people would expect not to stop, it would be this guy. But the thing is, the man didn't just stop to check on the man. He gave him a ride. Now, remember the priest who was riding into Jerusalem. So this man offered something the priest failed to offer. But then he also treated his wounds with oil and wine and bandaged them. And so this was probably a common treatment for wounds. The wine was used to disinfect. The oil was to help protect and heal the skin, probably. And to keep other things from like flies and other insects from getting into it. It was used to help keep it clean, not just clean it, but help keep it clean. And what's interesting is the Levite probably would have had these materials on him. He probably would have had oil and wine for his duty in the temple. So this Samaritan, Jesus is saying, he's doing the very thing that the other people could have done. It's not that he was able to do something nobody else could do. He did the very basic things that these other two people could have done. But then he goes a step further. And he takes the man to the inn. And there are a couple things here that I really want to look at. First, the odds were good that this guy would be harassed, potentially beaten up, or attacked for coming in Jerusalem. So when I say that they were hated and despised, I mean they were hated and despised to the point where if they stepped foot in these areas, they could be attacked. And so not only did he risk it, but due to his status, he had to put a down payment on for this man's needs. And when he does that, he doesn't know what the total is going to be. It could rack up quite a significant total. And so the man's taking a risk because if he couldn't afford to pay the whole bill, he could be taken as a slave until his debt is paid, which usually once you're in that spot, it was very hard to pay off that debt and get back out of that place. But he goes ahead and gives his word. He gives his promise. He says, I will do it. I will come back. And by doing so, he's risking his life a second time to go back to the place where these men hate him. And so he's done everything that he could possibly do, including risk his own welfare, again, unlike what the Levite was willing to do, in order to help this man. So Jesus stops the story and he asks the man, so who was the one that loved? Who was the one that offered this great sacrifice? And the lawyer, realizing what Jesus is asking, he doesn't even mention the Samaritan. He just simply says, well, that one guy. I mean, this is how much they were hated. Like, did I mention that already? Like, they were hated so much that the lawyer couldn't even bear say, well, the Samaritan. He says, well, that one guy. He kind of passes it off and goes by it. And the problem with this story, and the thing that makes this story uncomfortable when we understand it, is Jesus kind of implies that the other two people should have stopped. That they failed to do something, even though they were doing the most logical thing in their mind due to not stopping. And so when the lawyer asks Jesus, who really do I have to love? Jesus picks the most hated person that he could think of. And he didn't just say, love this guy. But then he goes and makes this guy the hero of the story and says, this is the guy that's loving. And so this person that he despised is now placed in a position of honor. So how many of you guys have ever had somebody that you just couldn't stand or you just didn't like, and then all of a sudden they're getting all the accolades, they're getting promotions, they're getting all the attention, they're getting all the awards? This was kind of like that for this guy. The person he couldn't stand the most was getting acknowledged by Jesus. And kind of it was one of those how dare he kind of moments. But the thing is, like, as humans, we're really good at loving people that love us. We're good at loving people that fit into our world, that do things for us, that act like us, that make us laugh, that fit into our purview of the world. Or the people that just make it easy for us to love them. Our default is kind of like, I will love you if you deserve my love. And we don't really talk about it that way. We might not phrase it that way because I don't think any of us would say that out loud. I'll love you if you deserve my love. But our actions say that to people. If you're popular enough, I'll give you my affections and my love. If you do something for me, I'll give you my affections and my love. If you make me laugh, if you return my affections. But what Jesus is saying here is that being a true neighbor, loving like Jesus loves, requires something of us. It requires us to go beyond that place. What Jesus is telling this lawyer is that you're supposed to love even the ones that aren't easy to love and even the ones that may never love you back and don't earn your love. So there's some key truths that real quickly I want to hit because I'm running out of time. And first of all, loving your neighbor is not supposed to be an easy out. It's not supposed to be easy. This man wanted to get away with loving people that just looked like him or acted like him or part of his community. But Jesus tells him that being a real neighbor, like that really loving people, costs something. Because being a neighbor, secondly, is a choice. Loving people and being a neighbor is not easy, and it's not always pretty, and it means getting dirty sometimes, and it's messy, and it risks something. But Jesus tells us that this is our choice. This is what we're called to do. We can choose to stay in our comfort zone, or we can choose to obey the call of Jesus and love people around us. And thirdly, that choice does require sacrifice sometimes. As I said, loving people is meant to cost us something, and Jesus demonstrated this love and what this love looks like. It was love that was meant to be sacrificial. For the Samaritan, it cost a lot, and maybe it doesn't cost that much for us every time, but love, true love and sacrifice does cost something. And finally, by loving others, we're able to show God's love in the world around us. And as we look through this series, we're going to look at what it really means to love and to be a neighbor, and how and where we find the strength to do that. But the bottom line today is that we are supposed to love others, and that love, being a neighbor, is a choice. So this week, think of some ways that you can be a neighbor. Who are some people that you need to actively love and reach out to? Think of one thing, just one thing this week that you can do to show God's love to somebody that might not earn your love. Because again, being a neighbor is a choice. We'll see you guys next time.